Jeremy and Joe, no Sneaky Joe today. He's off the rest of the week, and you got me. Owen Parker's here. Joe Kelly producing, and on the Wester Hotline we go to Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast to chat about the trade deadline that was and wasn't for a lot of the contenders. Joe, good morning. I started the show today saying I'm just kind of amazed, really, that the top teams didn't do something. And I know I'm not here to say make a trade just to make a trade, but the Colts and the Seahawks got bold. And teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, New England didn't, and I think it's a missed opportunity for those teams.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The Bills, among several teams, like you mentioned, Kansas City, who has holes. The Patriots, they're 7-2 in first place in the AFC East. They have resources for sure. They didn't do anything. In fact, they sold players, right? They sold Kyle Duggar and Keon White, a couple of young defensive players there. Even like a team like the Steelers at 5-3 with some of the warts that they've shown. They're still 2 up in that division. The Ravens are coming, but yeah, a lot of inactivity, especially across the AFC when you thought there'd be some teams that would be certainly searching for some help.
So, Joe, how disappointed should Bills fans be that there was not a move made? If you want to limit it just to the guys that were moved, Jacoby Myers, who's the other? Rashid Shaheed, some of the defensive pieces that were moved, if you want to make that Jalen Phillips. How disappointed are you that they didn't make a move?
Well, I certainly thought there was an opportunity to add something at receiver and maybe even along the defensive line where Michael Hoecht and Ed Oliver won't be available for this football team. And looking at the Myers trade and the Rashid Shaheed trade and even the Draymond Jones trade that Tennessee did with Baltimore, I thought those were some opportunities there that I think the Bills could have replenished a little bit. And at wide receiver, I know this has been a thing for you for a while, and it's certainly, as I watch the film on this team, it's become something that I'm more and more dialed into, where you're just looking at the looks that this offense gets. Teams playing man coverage, teams isolating Keon Coleman against corners and living with it, right? The Bills don't have a player right now, or Keon Coleman is not a player right now that is making teams pay for that choice. And I think it really affects the overall offense because you lose that chance to go after a good one-on-one matchup, but then also it's putting more into the box to defend the run. It's putting more attention on Josh Allen because there's a player that you only get 5 eligibles on a play. And one of them, at least, teams are just unconcerned with. And it's a missed opportunity. And so I certainly would have liked the Bills to go get a Rashid Shaheed or Jacoby Myers, but also internally they have to look at what they have in, Josh Palmer potentially coming back, Gabe Davis, yes, as a possibility, but they need to get something in there in that Keon Coleman role that's going to force teams to respect something and not jam up this offense in ways that it currently is because Keon Coleman's getting as much opportunity and snaps as he's getting.
How jammed up is the offense? Because they just scored 40 against Carolina. They scored 20 against Kansas City. So they certainly have their pathways to having good offensive days. And we know the standard is of course, very, very high. So to use the phrase you used there, is that a concern that certain teams, they won't be able to get around the fact that they have that problem over there on the one side?
Well, you have the most prolific scoring threat in the history of the NFL playing quarterback in Josh Allen. So he's going to be able to overcome quite a bit. But I think that's exactly why I want something there, because I want Josh Allen to be as dynamic as he possibly can. And that would mean having the receiver that plays the most on your team being pretty dynamic. And right now that player is not dynamic. And so I think it's the best way to maximize Josh Allen, which feels like that's important, right? It should be. I think it's the best way to help your defense that is clearly at its best when they can force offenses to be one-dimensional and really tee off and rush the passer and allow their DBs to hunt and make plays on the ball, especially with some of the young guys that are back in the lineup. That's what it comes down to for me. And so, Josh Allen has told us, he's shown us that, he can make it work pretty much with whatever receivers he has. But I think it's silly to not want, something a little bit more dynamic in that spot to maximize your everything quarterback.
How about the Michael Hoecht piece, Joe? We could talk lots about, if they could have upgraded at receiver. Should they have been aggressive trying to find the Michael Hoecht replacement? And I know he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife to a degree. Was there a player that moved that would have satisfied you in that department?
I think the Draymond Jones trade that Baltimore did with Tennessee. Draymond Jones, 28 years old. He's a hybrid player, inside-outside player. Now, he's not quite the player that you're going to think of playing in space like a Michael Hoecht can, but a versatile rusher. I don't think he's Michael Hoecht. And, of course, that's a really unique player and a unique role that was looking very promising. But I think Draymond Jones could have given the Bills some interior pass rush that's missing, right, with Hoyt, who was mostly rushing the A gaps and the B gaps, with Ed Oliver, who's not around. And so for a fifth rounder that could conditionally become a 4, to me that would have been a worthwhile piece to kind of replenish something for your interior pass rush, in particular with the versatile guy that, not a one-for-one, few players will be, but can certainly restore some of that interior presence.
Joe Marino on the Western Hotline. All right, Joe, on the Chiefs game, what did you see on the All-22? What did the Bills do in this game? Let's start defensively, because they held Patrick Mahomes to a 38% catchable throw rate and his completion percentage, the worst of his career. What did the Bills do defensively in this game? And the bigger question about this is, can they replicate it? Can it be the same in the postseason and work again?
Well, they were really dynamic how they rushed the quarterback. Did some very unique, creative things with using kind of a dime look, but you had a rush that was pretty much Bosa and Rousseau on the edge, and then Hoyt and Dorian Williams on the inside. And they used Hoyt and Dorian Williams to, one of them was typically like a spy mirror player. And what this spy mirror player does is obviously they stay leveraged over Mahomes, but it gives the rush freedom, right? You have to be very disciplined when you rush a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, because if you're not in your rush lane, he's going to kill you, right? He's going to find space and he's going to make throws down the field. Well, by having this mirror player over top of that, it gave Rousseau and Bosa freedom to go inside, to go outside, and rush however they wanted to rush, knowing that you have that secondary contained over the top. And then you have, those guys are generally compression-style rushers that play with power, so they're not necessarily, your fly up the field, win with speed guys. So I think that generally helps them to be more disciplined with how they collapse the width of the pocket as opposed to getting too far up the field. So stylistically, those players with the mirror player over top, and then you have the other one, whether it's Hoyt or Williams, creating picks, right? So there was times where that player would just rush a gap, but also where they would go and they would pick the tackle that allows one of Rousseau or Bosa to work back inside. So the reality is there's just a lot going on right there in front of Patrick Mahomes that's advantageous to the Bills to rush, and it's obviously affecting Mahomes, and you saw him bailing quick, left, right, backwards, being inaccurate with throws, forcing some throws, and they certainly had him rattled, and it was cool to see. I think that was complemented by good coverage on the back end. Certainly getting some more speed in the lineup with Maxwell Harrison has been significant. Hancock at times being able to give them some more range, but ultimately being a lot more connected and tighter in coverage with a complementary rush, and a rush that really confused Mahomes and made him look as flustered as I've seen him. Probably the only other time I've seen him more flustered was a Super Bowl loss against the Eagles last February.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast, joining us, talking Bills and Chiefs. And, that I guess the question I would have is, one of the things you mentioned in your review is how the Bills did a very specific thing, like they game plan for these Chiefs. Do you feel like the Chiefs did anything the Bills had not seen before? Or did they, I guess, Joe, did they have the idea that they were going to roll in here and the Bills were going to do what the Bills do? Because you've mentioned this before. The Bills are known as a team that kind of lines up. You know what they're going to do. Were the Bills big-time tendency breakers in this game, and maybe that's what crossed up Kansas City?
Well, I think Kansas City saw some blood in the water, or smelt blood in the water with Taron Johnson not playing in the game. And, you're in a situation where on Friday, you're playing on Sunday, your nickel corner gets hurt, and now it's Cam Lewis. And there's a domino effect there where Cam Lewis now becomes your slot, which means Cam Lewis is not your dime player, and that becomes Jamarcus Ingram, who is sometimes a healthy scratch, right? So they're like, yeah, let's put all these receivers on the field. Let's force them to be in nickel and dime defense, and the Bills were. They were literally 100% in nickel and dime defense. And they're thinking, well, Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram are on the field. Let's go after that. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work at all. The Bills were able to use their depth and overcome. And with the rush, obviously it really mattered. And so I think that was really helpful because I thought there was some opportunities for Kansas City to run the football. The interior defensive line was not very firm against the run. And I know it was 20 carries for 79 yards. So, metrically, that feels pretty good. But there was a lot of efficiency with how they ran the football. And I think the Bills are fortunate they didn't stay committed to it because I think there was some space there to run the ball. But that's the nature of the Chiefs this year. They've been very pass-aggressive, the most pass-aggressive team. They smelled blood in the water based on some matchups. But the Bills had the right stuff defensively to kind of shut that down. When it comes to the Bills' offense, I think they were, obviously very aware of the tendencies to blitz, and that's why they ran 8 screens in the game. I know to the frustration of some, but I think that was important to kind of keep Kansas City honest. They came in with a very blended run scheme, but actually leaned more towards some gap principles. And Kansas City is a very, very disciplined run defense, and they are in their gaps. They get off blocks, but the Bills did a good job of throwing a lot of bodies at these Chiefs boxes with a fullback, with Jackson Hawes, and using Jackson Hawes as a puller a lot of times to just get hat on a hat and let James Cook figure it out and find the green grass, and he certainly did. So I think the Bills had the right stuff offensively and defensively, and I think Kansas City thought they'd just be able to throw the ball all over the place against the depleted Bills defense in some ways, and the Bills had the answers on Sunday.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast, joining us on the Western Hotline. All right, Joe, thanks, and enjoy the Miami game. We'll chat next week.
All right, sounds good, Jeremy. Thank you.
Joe Marino. Find all that he does on thejoemarino.com, from the Locked On Bills to the Bills Squad show with me and Jerry O, and also Herd Mentality, the All-22 stuff. Joe does great work, and always a pleasure.